Hey you guys, it's Chrissy from Stitch Collective, and today I want to talk to you about how to sew without pins. So I started sewing without pins 5, maybe 6 years ago, and it's no exaggeration that it completely revolutionized my sewing. For a couple different reasons. The first is that sewing without pins is much more efficient for me. It's faster. I'm not spending all the time pinning a seam and then as I'm sewing, removing all the pins and stopping each time. Number 2, it gives me a lot more control when I'm moving my project through the machine. So today I'm going to show you how to do that with this strip of muslin. This strip is 36 inches long and 3 inches wide. And what we're going to do is, as we're sewing it, I'm going to show you how to place your hands. And by the end, we'll have where we start at the top and where we end at the end of the seam match up. What we're going to do to get started is match up the ends of our fabric, and then we're going to place it under the machine, lower the needle. So what that's doing is it's locking the fabric into the machine with both the presser foot and the needle. And then what we're going to do is, and this is 36 inches long, so it's pretty long. So what I'm going to do is match up the ends of the fabric, and then I'm actually going to hold it over my left shoulder. And what that's doing is it's allowing me to grasp about halfway down the strip of fabric to make sure that the length is even on both top and bottom. And then I'm going to grasp one more time with my right hand about 6 to 8 inches from the presser foot. And then what I'm going to do is go ahead and with my fingers on top and my thumb on the bottom of the strip of fabric, I'm actually going to rotate my hand towards the face of the sewing machine. And what that's doing is it's locking the 2 layers of fabric together so that they're not going to shift as I sew. And then the next really important thing that you're going to need to do is with your left hand. So with your left hand, you're going to curl your fingers slightly, and then you're going to place them on the fabric with the pads of your fingers applying light pressure. And so what that's doing is it's just controlling the shifting from side to side, and it's going to be able to let you control the movement of the seam as it goes through the machine much better. So once I start sewing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my right hand like this, keep my left hand applying light pressure. And then if I see any of the layers shifting, like the top or the bottom layer, I can slightly adjust my fingers with my left hand to just move it into position, keep it even before it goes under the needle. So let's give it a go. And we're going to sew until about an inch or 2 from the presser foot for your hand. You don't want to get your hand too close to the needle. And my machine is computerized, so it's programmed to stop with the needle down. But if your machine is a mechanical machine or you have a needle up down button, you'd want to make sure to press that before you take your hand off of the fabric, because what that's doing is it's locking it into position again, and it's making it as secure as it can possibly be, because then you're going to take your hand off of the seam. You're going to match up the ends again, and then work your way down again. So again, I'm grasping it about halfway, and that's just to make sure the layers are even. And then I'm going to hold that with my left hand so that I can get my right hand into position, again, 6 to 8 inches from the needle or the presser foot. With my fingers on top and my thumb underneath, I'm then going to rotate my right hand up towards the face of the sewing machine. And this is important because, again, it's locking the 2 layers of fabric together. And then with my left hand, again, I'm going to curl my fingers under, have the pads of my fingers putting light pressure on the surface of the fabric. I like to keep it off to the side so it's not directly in front of the needle. And then we're going to sew the next section of this seam. And then we're just going to keep matching it up and moving along. So let's say you're sewing something really long, like maybe the side seam of a maxi dress or like a blanket, and you literally can't hold the entire seam over your shoulder to match up the ends and keep it under tension. What you could do is just use, if it has matching notches on like the top and bottom layer, just use that, because you know those 2 portions of the seams are supposed to be together. So you can match there and just work your way down. You don't have to actually do it from the end of the seam. But since this is pretty short, I'm just going to keep doing it from the end. Oh, and the one thing I'm showing you here is there's not really room at the end of the seam for my entire hand to lock the fabric into place because it's going to take up a lot of real estate at the end of the seam. So I'm just using 1 or 2 fingers on top and then my thumb still on the bottom and rotating up from there. So I'm locking it into place, but I have more room to get closer to the presser foot. And then once you get within a couple of inches of the needle, you're not going to be able to lock it into place. So you're just going to sew to the end of the seam. In this case, I'm not going to back tack because this is just a demonstration seam, but generally you would back tack to secure your stitching. So if you can see this is the end and it's matched up at the end and then also the beginning. So one more thing that I want to talk about is actually why this works. So when you lock the fabric layers into place with your hand, what it's doing is it's putting more tension on the bottom layer of fabric than the top. And that's important because of the way that your machine feeds fabric through it. There are the feed dogs, which you can see here. They're the little metal teeth at the bottom of the machine that move in a circular motion to pull the fabric through the machine. And what that's doing is because it has direct contact with the bottom layer, it's actually pulling it a little bit faster than it can pull the top layer. And for the top layer, there's the presser foot that's putting pressure on it to hold it into the machine while the needle's moving. But what that also does is it means that it's pushing it ever so slightly forward. So, you know, when you're sewing, even if you're using pins and you get to the end of the seam and you notice that the top layer is slightly longer than the bottom layer, it's because the foot is pushing the top layer just a little bit and the feed dogs are pulling the bottom layer ever so slightly. And what that does is it's easing the bottom layer more than it is the top layer. So that's why you get the mismatch. It's not that you cut them wrong, it's just the way that the machine works. And so the next thing that I want to show you is actually how to use that to your advantage. So these are 2 strips of fabric. The bottom layer is going to be 36 inches and the top layer is 35. So what that means is we have 1 inch of fabric that we need to ease into the top layer. And what that means is I'm going to put, so you can see here, it's kind of arced. So I'm going to put the longer layer against the feed dogs and I'm going to use that, the fact that they ease in fabric to my advantage. So just like the first time, we're going to match up the beginning of the seam. We're going to put it under the foot here. Gonna lower our needle. And then now, when we're matching it up, we're gonna have a mismatch. So we're gonna make the seams match up. And then what I'm gonna do, you can see again that it's bowed. So I'm gonna try to grasp it about halfway. So I'm getting about as much of the extra length at the top and the bottom of the length of the seam. So then what I'm going to do again, hold with my left hand so I'm keeping it secure. And then again, every time you go farther down to the needle, you want to try to distribute the extra length as evenly as possible. So again, just like the regular seam that we're sewing is going to be the same length, for this longer length, we're still going to have our fingers on top and our thumb on the bottom. We're going to rotate our hand up towards the front of the machine. We're going to have our left hand, we're putting it down onto the fabric with the pads of our fingers, applying that light pressure, and then we're going to get started. And then each time, similar as before, each time you stop and reorient your hands, you're just going to match the end of the seam together. Again, try to distribute about half of the extra length along the top and bottom evenly. And then we're just going to get about 8 inches from the needle. Lock our right hand into place, get our left hand in position. All right, we're coming to the end of the seam now. And if I did this right, then they should match up. Okay, so what you can see here is, here's where we started. And then if you can see where we ended. And what you can see here is the top, it's pretty smooth. But at the bottom, you can actually see rippling along the entire length of the seam. And that's expected because, again, it's eased in the inch of extra length along the top layer of fabric. And so this would be really useful in instances where you are easing, like say, a sleeve into an armhole where you have the extra ease in the sleeve head for the range of motion. This would allow you to do that. If you're doing it flat, inserting the sleeve in flat, this would allow you to do that without pins, or just any seam where you have a longer length seam going into a shorter length one. And then also, once you press this open, these ripples will go away, so it will not be visible. And then again, the reason this is working is because when the layers are locked together, we're allowing the feed dogs to ease in the extra length while locking the top layer into place so that nothing is shifting around. It can only ease in what we're allowing it to. So we've sewed this seam without pins. I hope you guys have seen how useful this can be. And all of this is not to say that I don't have any pins in my sewing room. That's not the case at all. But what it allows me to do is I can use my pins much more strategically. So if it's like a really tricky seam or like a really fiddly place that I can't get my hands into under the machine, I would totally use a pin there. But what this does is it allows you to control more of your sewing and hopefully become more efficient. And if you guys try this, I would love for you to tag me on Instagram. Here's my Instagram handle. I would love to see how you like it. Thanks, you guys.